Right, see how this one goes. I've just did a video on the Weimar Constitution itself, very short, very brief intro. So what I thought I'd do now is have a little look at the actual key features of the Weimar Republic and the Weimar Constitution, the strengths and weaknesses of the Weimar Republic and Constitution, and the key issues facing the Weimar government in its early years, 1919 to 1920. Just to recap, elections were held, first big elections for this new Weimar Constitution, Weimar government, sorry, in February 1919. 82% turnout, very, very high. Ebert won. He was the leader of the SPD, the Social Democrat Party. He won 40%, not a majority. The new system of government was a republic because there was no Kaiser anymore. There was no monarch, no king or queen. So therefore it's a republic. Now, I figure that there are six key features of the Weimar Constitution. Right now, all the books talk about them. They're great. Love this one. Old school, really detailed, and every historian's favourite, Mr. Walsh. Okay? All do it. They all cover it, but I figure there's six. So, number one, all Germans got the vote. All Germans over 20. It used to be 25, and it's all Germans, that's male and female. It used to be all males over 25. So it's a really, really good step forward there. It was also a secret ballot, which means you kind of went into a little cubicle and you drew your curtain and you put your tickle your cross on the ballot sheet, on the voting sheet, and no one knew how you voted. So you could vote exactly as you wanted with no outside pressure. All Germans over 20, male and female, got the vote in a secret ballot. 1. 2. The Weimar Constitution gave all Germans equal rights in terms of speech, religion, and equality before the law. So everyone was treated the same by the law. So 1, vote. 2, rights. 3, the president of the Weimar Republic. Now, he's the head of the state. If you kind of like, he's a bit like the Kaiser would have been, but he was elected every 7 years, unlike the Kaiser who was never elected. So he was elected every 7 years by all the Germans, and he chose the Chancellor. And that's the fourth thing, the Chancellor. Now, the Chancellor is the head of the government. Right? He chose the people that he wanted to be in government, the top guys, the ministers, but they were all from the Reichstag. Okay, so the president couldn't appoint his best mate to be the Chancellor. The Chancellor had to be from the Reichstag, which is the fifth thing. The Reichstag. Reichstag essentially is Parliament, the German Parliament. It made the laws, it appointed the government, and it was elected every 4 years. All right. And then sixth, you have the Weimar Republic itself was made up of 18 different states. So you've got like Bavaria and other ones that I can never remember. Bavaria is always my go-to example. And each of those states had its own parliament, and it could make its own laws, and it had its own police force. So there was a bit of independence there. But it could be overruled by the national government, the Weimar government, okay, Weimar Republic. So there's 6 things. 1, all Germans had the vote. 2, all Germans had rights under law. 3, the president was the head of the state. 4, the chancellor was the head of the government. 5, the Reichstag made the laws. And 6, each of the individual states had some degree of independence. All right, cool. So that's the key features. Now, the classic GCSE question, the one that I always like to set, is about, because it involves a degree of analysis, which is a wee bit tougher to do than just repeating knowledge. So, it's the strengths and the weaknesses of the Weimar Republic. We've already identified what the key features were, easy. Now we have to analyse how good or bad it was. All right. So if we take each of those elements, that will help us. So the first thing you want to talk about is one of the major strengths of the Weimar Republic and the Weimar Constitution, the rules, is it was unbelievably democratic. Super democratic, probably one of the most democratic systems in the world at that time. Everyone had equality before the law, freedom of speech guaranteed, freedom of religion guaranteed, and all Germans had the vote over 20. Super democratic. There is a problem with democracy, though, which is a weakness of the Weimar Constitution. Not everyone in Germany wanted a democracy. Many of them were monarchists, i.e. they supported the Kaiser, or communists, or various extremist groups. But democracy gives them the vote. So it actually gives them the power to get rid of the thing that gave them power. They could use their vote to get rid of, or destroy, or remove the Weimar Republic, the democratic system. All right, that will possibly make a little bit more sense as you go through your course. All right. The president, number 2. The strength of that, strong president could certainly help your country in times of difficulty, in emergencies. Because he could use Article 48, make very clear laws without going to the Reichstag. But that's a bit undemocratic if you stop and think about it. He could just make a law without anyone having to agree to it. The Chancellor, the guy in charge of the day-to-day running of the government, he was very, very democratic because he had to have a majority of support in the Reichstag. All right. But that was actually really, really, really hard to achieve because of the next point, proportional representation. So that's the 4th point, proportional representation. Now that means that if you win 20% of the votes, you get 20% of the seats in the Reichstag, the parliament. Super fair, everybody's vote counts. It's brilliant, it's really great, super democratic. Except, right, that there are too many small parties that can be represented. All right. Now in the 1920s, there were 28 different political parties in the Reichstag. Now on one hand that's very democratic, but on the other hand, what it does is it dilutes the power of the Reichstag, because there are so many little groups there, no one can have a majority, which meant that in order to form a government, you had to create what's called a coalition, i.e. Get some mates together from a different party, sort of make friends and go, look, let's rule together, let's share power. All right? Now that's good, that's fine, it works. Unfortunately, coalitions, because they're from 2 different parties, they don't always see eye to eye on every issue. Okay, so it means that things have to be compromises, which is weak, and it means that the government itself is not a super strong united government, because they're arguing about little things. So it becomes unstable. And those are the 2 things that are important to remember: weak and unstable governments. Okay? And in a time of an emergency, that's the absolutely last thing you want. You want one strong government to make decisions and start dealing with the issue. Proportional representation made that very tricky. And then Article 48, which was a thing that gave the president the right to pass laws in an emergency without having to go to the Reichstag. That meant that in a difficult situation, strong decisions could be made, but it's very undemocratic. And the states' rights, that's super democratic. That's lovely, there's all these 18 different states, they have a little bit of authority and control over their own events or circumstances and issues that affect them personally. But they could also oppose the national government. All right, so strengths and weaknesses of both. Okay, quite straightforward. Right. Each of the key guys, I'll give you a little bit more detail about those. It's always good to put a bit more detail in your answer. President, elected every 7 years. Head of state, and he chose the Chancellor from the Reichstag. President. Chancellor, head of the government, ran Germany on a day-to-day basis. He chose a government, or chose ministers, people to run the country. But he also needed a majority support in the Reichstag, which was a bit hard to get. Thirdly, the Reichstag was the parliament. It made the laws, and parties were given seats according to the percentage of the vote they won. Proportional representation. Okay. The German people all had the vote, men and women over 20, and it was in a secret ballot. State governments, number 5, 18 states had their own parliament, had their own laws, had their own police, but they could be overruled by the national government, but they could also cause problems for them. And Article 48, number 6, gave the president emergency powers to pass laws without the Reichstag. Now, on the surface, the Weimar Republic looks really, really, really good, super democratic, but there are some issues. All right, one, huge economic issues in Germany that they had to deal with. Two, political division. Not everybody wanted democracy in Germany. Some wanted the Kaiser back. Some communists wanted to destroy the whole system and have a workers' revolution. Senior army leaders didn't really want to work with the government. Some nationalists industrialists didn't want to work with the government particularly. They didn't support the system. Now, in order to deal with the political divisions and the economic issues that Germany faced in 1919, 1920, it absolutely needed the politicians to work together. All right, they needed to work together to solve the issues, but they didn't, or they couldn't. All right? They didn't want to, or they couldn't do it. And proportional representation certainly did not help create a strong, stable, united government able to deal with the big issues that Germany was facing: political division and economic issues. All right, so key features of the Weimar Republic, strengths and weaknesses of the Weimar Republic, and the problems faced and they had to deal with. All right, it's a bit of a long one, sorry.